Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome. It is another edition of College Football After Dark. We certainly apologize for some of those technical difficulties that we ran into a week ago. You know, it's one of those things you don't know while you're doing it until it's finally over. So some people got an abbreviated replay. Hopefully this week we got everything rolling smooth here on the show. We're so happy you join us. I am Dan Bach, and I'm joined by my partner in crime here each and every Thursday night, the one and only Head Chop, David Kaplan. What's up, Chop? How are you, my man?
Hanging in there, man. We're counting down. This is the part of the week where you count down till Saturday morning kickoff, and it's close now, man.
Yes, and it was, and the nice thing is we're finally starting to move closer to conference play. We're not there all the way, but we're pretty darn close. There's still some blowouts, but it's nice to kind of get rid of these, Our Lady of the Worthless type matchups that we're dealing with here a lot. So I don't know about you, but it's a very welcome kind of, part of the schedule for me because it's nothing worse than trying to handicap those games. I mean, this Sony Michael guy or Michelle, I don't know how you pronounce it there for Georgia. I mean, those are Todd Gurley numbers, and the second or third string running back did that last week, and that's what's going to happen when you have those blowouts, and I kind of hate it.
Yeah, well, we're getting to a point where now not only that, but you know who the good players are. Like those first week or two, you're kind of just still, even if you've done your research all off season, you're still filling out like, what are the high-flying offenses and who's going to benefit from those offenses. Now you kind of know. About the fifth week like this, you got a good groundwork, and then you start rolling into conference play. So everything should really fall into place now for the really good players.
Yeah, I think so, and it should be fun. I had myself quite a Saturday night this past week. A 341, I think it was, on DraftKings late slate. I had the nuts, to say the very least there, Chop.
We were like almost on opposite ends of the day-night spectrum. I had a really good morning, but I did not have Perrine at night, and that was the end of the night right there if you didn't have that guy.
Yeah, Samaje Perine went absolutely nuts. And the question is going to be, who goes nuts this week? Because there were some crazy, crazy numbers put up, and we'll try and sort that out for you. Okay, we're going to start out with the odds, look at some of the highest totals of the week. And we'll start out with, let's see, I think we got some upper 50 or upper 60s maybe. First off, Maryland and Indiana, 69.5. I think every game Indiana is going to be a part of, you're going to see a line close to almost 70 points. And last week, Matty Mock didn't quite put up the numbers that I know a lot of people expected. I kind of talked myself off him. And even though he was kind of adequate, it wasn't great. It'll be very interesting to see how C.J. Brown does in this matchup. I'm sure we'll talk about him a good bit. Navy and Western Kentucky at 66. A couple of quarterbacks in that matchup. One throws it all day long. The other one runs it all day long. Navy a 7-point favorite in a fairly high total in that one. You've got Arkansas and A&M 71.5 and a 9-point favorite there for Texas A&M. If you're not looking at these point spreads, you're doing it wrong, and it's about time A&M has a competitive game. It's been a while, so I think this could be a pretty good spot for Kenny Hill. A few other ones for you. North Carolina Clemson at 67.5. Baylor and Iowa State at 71.5. That's fully expected anytime Baylor is out there. And that looks like it. A couple of 66s in Washington State, Utah, and Texas State, Tulsa. So those are the games that obviously you want to get some exposure to. And we're going to jump in at the quarterback spot where Chop, I've been trying to find out who my number one guy is. I've kind of been on it the last few weeks, I feel, although Marquise Williams kind of let me down last week. But for me, I'm going back against Indiana. Even though I was against Matty Mock last week, I'm going against the Indiana defense. And C.J. Brown, bang for your buck, I think is number one for me this week. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's first off, in college, I'm a sucker for a guy who takes off and runs and racks up the rushing yards. It's It's not like the NFL where the running quarterbacks in the NFL, you're lucky to get 50 yards, and you feel like you've been blessed with 5 extra points. In college, those guys can get 200 yards. C.J. Brown's one of those guys. He can put up a 200-yard rushing game, score touchdowns both in the through the air and on the ground, and yeah, if he's not the number one quarterback, he's in the top three, easily in the entire day, night, whatever you want to classify it as. He's definitely up there.
Yeah, I just can't see anybody who I like him a little bit more. I mean, obviously Bryce Petty's a great player, but he's way more expensive. And I think that, Brown, like you say, the running ability is what sets him apart. He's not even a good passer at all. I mean, some of his numbers are terrible. But
Yeah.
you know that he's going to call his own number a good bit, and they don't really have any other running backs that they're interested in feeding the ball to. So I really don't see any drawback here. It's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it'll be a fairly close game, and I think you'd be wise to probably get him some exposure because, again, those rushing touchdowns are valued at a couple more points than those passing touchdowns. Now, Bryce Petty and Jameis Winston, those guys I see lead your FanDuel list on our expert rankings this week. Are you looking at Jameis to have a statement game after what happened last week?
That's pretty much precisely why I have him ranked so high. I just think that, like, after everything that happened to him the last week and a half, this is going to be one of those games where he just comes out and he just sticks it to everybody. The spread is 19 right now. That's not too bad. It's a road game at NC State. That makes me feel better about it because it will make it a little bit more competitive. If it was at Florida State, that spread might be 28. Okay, and it'd be a lot tougher to trust him. That's the one thing. It's the spread's not so high on him that. Let's say I think Nick Marshall is a great play, but it's a 32-point spread. Jake Waters is a great play, but it's a 28-point spread. When you get up into the high 20s and low 30s, you're scaring me off because I just don't know how much action my quarterback's going to get. That 19 to 20 range with Winston on the road seems like a really good spot for him to stay in there all 4 quarters and push it to the metal, pedal to the metal all 4 quarters. So that's why I got him ranked high. So, but I mean, you go Winston, you go Brown, whatever you want to do. I don't think you can go wrong with a few of these guys this week.
You mentioned Nick Marshall. I actually really like him, and you make up a good point, the blow-up potential. Kenny Hill kind of fell victim to that last week, and it does worry me a little bit for Auburn because I think, I'm not mistaken, they might have LSU coming up pretty soon. I know they've got a big game, whatever it is, next week, and you're always cautious of that because these coaches don't want to obviously have their star players hurt going into a premium matchup. But Marshall's somebody who I think is underpriced. I know the numbers he put up were awfully impressive towards the tail end of last year. Obviously, that opener, he only played about half of the game because of the drug charges in the offseason. I think Nick Marshall's kind of sneaky. I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him, even though it is a high point spread game. So I do kind of like him a little bit this week. Doesn't sound like you do nearly as much.
No, I mean, I love Nick Marshall as a talent. I would rather play him in more competitive games. You get a week like this, and you can take C.J. Brown for a similar price, or you can take there's other passing quarterbacks also who are in pretty good spots this week with similar prices and that have lower point spreads that seem to be in bigger shootout potentials. I don't know if I want to trust too much on a guy with about a 5-touchdown spread there, and you just don't know. If they build that lead up quick in the first quarter and he's not part of it, or not too much part of it, he might get himself yanked out in the second quarter, and you're sitting on 2, even 3 touchdowns. Really doesn't make you too happy if you're looking at C.J. Brown, and C.J.'s got like 5 or 6 total touchdowns.
Yeah, I love C.J. Brown, so he's going to be used a lot. On DraftKings, Kenny Hill looks underpriced. I'm just going to throw it out there. I think he's like 7,400 maybe out there, and 7,800. So he is less than C.J. Brown, and that's one of the highest total games. He's coming off a game where he only played a half. It should be a 4-quarter game. I don't see any drawback for Kenny Hill here. I mean, I think he's a lock for 4 touchdowns. and wouldn't surprise me if you got maybe even 5 or 6 if Arkansas can keep pace. So I like him a good bit this week.
Yeah, he's a DraftKings play, and we'll get into the salaries differential a little bit later with some of these guys, I think. But like Kenny Hill is one of those guys who's on my list for a DraftKings only play, because at 9,800 on FanDuel, he's about the second most expensive quarterback, and probably a little bit too much right there. There's not a whole lot of drawbacks on him. I mean, the only pitfalls might be like what happened to Texas Tech against Arkansas. Arkansas gets it and just pounds it so much that they keep the ball away from him, and then when he does get it, he's forcing it. But you can't really pass up too many teams on DraftKings without putting him on there. You know, even on your GPPs, and you're trying to be different than everybody else, it's still hard to pass up on that salary. But on FanDuel, I would probably say he's a no-go.
All right, let's talk about a few other guys here that are going to be on our radar. You mentioned Jake Waters, and I asked STL this question on our playbook series. Do you like Waters or Boykin better this week? Because I think those are two of my favorite kind of maybe middle tier plays this week.
If salary wasn't a factor, it would be Waters all day.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I like Waters a lot too.
Well,
Boykin on the road against this SMU team. I mean, maybe the fact that they're at home, SMU can maybe make it a 4-quarter game. I don't know, but Boykin's everything for that offense.
Well, I'm kind of looking at the spread on TCU's a 32-point spread. Waters is a 26-point spread. So they're both projected to be super big blowouts. I don't think either one of the opposing teams hangs with the favorite in that game. So I think they're both in danger of a blowout, period. So if you're going to ask me to trust one guy the most, it's going to be, first off, the guy I've seen more, which is Waters. I saw him at least last year. Boykin, we've seen him for 2 games this year in this new offense. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there. Although, I'll be playing him on FanDuel because he's got a good price.
He's cheap over there.
But, just for pure performance, Waters has been like really, really good with running the ball this year. And this UTEP defense, I wrote about them in one of my articles. They're really putrid stopping the run. So just pure performance without the pricing issues, I'd go Waters.
Okay. A few other guys. What's your take on this Clemson quarterback? Is it Deshaun Watson, I believe? Is that correct?
Yes, Deshaun Watson. He looks all right. I mean, I'm looking at the prices on he's on the night slate on both sites, and he looks to me like he's an avoid kind of guy on FanDuel, but on DraftKings his price is just low enough at 65 is still a pretty good chunk there, man. So. I don't know. The price is right there where it kind of should be. He's not. Listen, if this is a backup, it used to be a backup quarterback. He's getting the start now. If he were priced like he used to be a backup and he was in the $4,000 or $5,000 range on those sites, I'd say fantastic. But they've actually got him priced pretty decently in the middle of the pack there. So I think he's got talent. I think he could put up some good numbers. But I'm looking at like the FanDuel late slate, and he's priced right in there with some other really nice options this week, so it's tough to sort through those guys.
Well, I'm curious of who those are because I don't think there's a ton of value on FanDuel this week. Obviously, there's a few guys mixed in there, but not a lot that's standing out or sticking out like a sore thumb to me. And at 6,500, if you wanted to get 2 top-end running backs, you can do that. If you've taken C.J. Brown or Bryce Petty, or Jameis Winston, pretty good chance you're not going to get a Gurley and an Ajayi together in a lineup. So I think it kind of depends on what route you want to go. This kid was a huge prospect coming out of high school, and I'm kind of under the belief he's going to be okay here. First off, UNC has just been terrible. I mean, they gave up 70 points last week. They're 2 touchdown dogs in this game. And I'll tell you something that really kind of impressed me here was Taj Boyd in the same offense was an absolute beast last year. And this guy has been, non-existent on the, professional radar. He's clearly kind of a system quarterback. So I think Watson, he's a similar type player, I think, in terms of the fact that he does have the ability to run about as much as Boyd did, maybe a little bit more. And I think he fits this offense better than that Cole Stout they had before. So I think there's some credence to looking at him this week versus North Carolina.
I mean, he's one of those guys you can look at. Let's take the FanDuel slate at that time. All right, for his price, just saying, I've made up my FanDuel teams, and he wasn't on there at this point on FanDuel because for me it was like I could spend another $900 and I could get Travis Wilson at home against Washington State. At the exact same range, there's Dane Evans for Tulsa in a 65 point total game. Well, I don't
like either of those. Travis Wilson. Why do you like him so much? I don't get the infatuation with this guy. Under 200 yards. Look at the numbers. The guy's not that good.
He's a runner when he needs to run. First, the Michigan game last week, I kind of throw that out. Michigan's not a bad defense, and they went on the road and they did whatever they won the game. They didn't really need him a whole lot, but he's a very good runner when they force him to. I'm just kind of looking at what I think the game flow is going to be. And I think Washington State at Utah is going to be a huge shootout late at night, one of those Pac-12 shootouts. That's just the way I feel about it. And I'm looking at Clemson and USC, and Clemson's at home. UNC, Clemson has a chance to blow them out. I get it. If you give me two guys who I think are similar, and one's I think is going to be a shootout and one's going to be a blowout, I'll take the shootout because that game could go 4 quarters. Those Pac-12 games go crazy, so that's kind of what I'm looking at with Travis Wilson. But, in the same price range as Deshaun on FanDuel, you could get really spunky, and I don't think there's anybody who's going to play Dreyfus Jackson for Rice, and he is the exact same price, and I think he's got a chance to put up some monster numbers on the ground in this game against Southern Miss. That's just a couple of the guys. And there's actually a couple other guys who are really cheap who you could use if you really wanted to stock up on. San Jose State's got a backup quarterback who's going to be starting this week.
Yes.
Named Joe Gray, and he's not a bad quarterback at all. I did a little research on him. They're playing Nevada. It's a 5-point spread, 54 point total for minimum salary on FanDuel. You can imagine the possibility if you were to take him.
Yeah, you can fill up the roster if you have him for sure. I'm looking at the all-day slate on FanDuel. You got Sefa Lafua, J.T. Barrett, Sudfeld. Those guys are all kind of in that range. Anthony Boone, Tanner McAvoy. I don't know. What's your thoughts on J.T. Barrett? He gets Cincinnati. That defense hasn't looked good at all this year. Barrett against bad teams has looked very good. Against good teams, he's looked very bad. You got any beat on him this week?
I kind of like him. Once he shook off those first game jitters, he's actually looked pretty good. He's actually looked pretty good since then. Like you said, Cincinnati doesn't scare me on defense really very much. So I think you could do a lot worse than play J.T. Barrett. But like you just said, you mentioned a bunch of guys in the same price range. So you kind of just got to sort through which one you think is going to be in that big shootout or have that big game because they're all, on paper, they all look good and they're all in the same price range. So
I'm going to give you another name I like in that range, Sefa Lafua, Colorado against Cal. Last week, Anu Solomon had a monster game. He put some money in my pocket. And I think Lafua, I know everybody loves Nelson Spruce. I have not seen a college football write-up that does not have Nelson Spruce featured. For my money, if you're taking Lafua, you might as well take Spruce. You don't have to go handcuff in college, but he seems to just want to look his way all game, every game.
Yeah, he's a nice little sneaky play there, and it's another one of those Pac-12 games where I kind of look at it and go, it's California, man, and they could get into another one of those 49-45 shootouts, and then all your quarterbacks and wide receivers are just killing the point totals, and you're running by everybody in the tournaments at late at night. So you just got to be aware of those kind of things. The Pac-12 is notorious for no defense, aired out shootouts at nighttime.
Yeah, you like Connor Holiday. I see him high up on your list this week. I don't mind him.
I always
but
like Connor Holiday.
I don't mind him, but I don't love him.
I love the guy, man. Every week I love him.
I mean, it's the situation that we're dealing with here that I don't like. I mean, coming off that really I guess emotional game you could say against Oregon, now on the road against the Utah team whose defense there on their own right isn't. I don't think it's half bad. I mean, they did well, but that's not saying a whole lot. I mean, Holiday, again, I like him. I don't think he's quite a cash game play for me. But, you know, I mean, he's going to throw it 60 times, 70 times. So, obviously, he's in play a little bit, but not my favorite high-end guy. Give me C.J. Brown over him all day long. All day.
Well, yeah, that's clear in college. That's clear cut because CJ's got that rushing ability. But that's not to say that Connor can't. I mean, it's Washington State, so it's the system you're going for, and it's a system you could look at the end of the night and very easily he could have 405 touchdowns. You would not right now if I told you he was going to end up with 405 touchdowns, would you be like shocked, like, oh my God, I got it? That's an unbelievable number. You kind of know that there's a very good possibility that those kind of numbers are coming out of the Washington State quarterback, but. You know, the only thing that's driving him away is that price. That price is a little bit hefty this week.
Yeah, I mean, you can get Petty at a little bit more, Winston at a little bit less. Not a bad play. Definitely not a bad play, but we'll see. I think he'll be good, but I don't know if he'll be great. I don't know. We'll see. All right, let's move on to the running back spot here, Chop. And is Todd Gurley this week's Melvin Gordon? I mean, you said, last week I asked you, how much Melvin Gordon you have? And you're like, he's about 70%, which is good. I mean, that's a lot of Melvin Gordon to have. Bet you're wishing you had 100% of him last week.
I'm wishing I had 100% Melvin Gordon and 100% Pirine. In hindsight, Gordon, I mean, it's just one of those things. You know he's capable of having a game like that. And to be honest with you, nobody will be on him this week because probably they think that well is dry now, and the fact is he could do it once again because that's just the way they work in Wisconsin.
But there is no way, zero justification for spending $2,000 more on Melvin Gordon on FanDuel when you get Todd Gurley at 9,600.
No, not on FanDuel. There's no. But when I did a little bit of pricing calculations. Because I like to do that. I like to be efficient, man. If you're playing a lot on FanDuel and a lot on DraftKings, you have to find. First of all, we always say spread it out. Don't take the same players in every game. So one natural way to spread it out is to take the more efficiently priced players on that site. You naturally spread yourself out, and it turns out that it's very much acceptable. And you should be taking Melvin Gordon on DraftKings as opposed to FanDuel. FanDuel, he's off the board, but on DraftKings, he's a much more efficient player at 8,500, and so yeah, on FanDuel you don't take him over Gurley, no way, no how. The other site on DraftKings, there's only a $500 difference. You got to really think about it.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that sentiment. But on the same, and it's funny because you can flip the script a little bit with James Conner.
It's the exact opposite.
Total opposite on especially on DraftKings, which is a full point PPR. This guy's caught like one pass all year long. Like he's got zero presence in the pass game. They just pound it with him like 35 times a game. Unless he gets in the end zone, I don't want to say his upside's limited because it's still really, really good. But he's not going to catch 9 balls for 40 yards and then rush for 150 yards like a Melvin Gordon or a Tevin Coleman. Or Curtis Artis-Payne, may be able to do, and that's why on DraftKings I'm all out on James Conner, all out.
Yeah, no, I haven't made a team yet where I squeezed James Conner in there, and the one thing that really scared me was just the game flow in this one. At Pittsburgh, it could be a blowout. It just Akron at Pittsburgh just feels like it's going to be a blowout, and when they had a blowout earlier in the year, he got 16 carries out of it, and I know he made the most of them, but
4 touchdowns, yeah, but
if he gets only 16 carries, I probably don't want to spend 9,500 on 16 carries. I'd rather see a spread that was in like the 1 touchdown range, so we could have him on the field for 4 quarters. But I haven't made a team yet on DraftKings where I've put him on there, and I know he's a good player, but there's just circumstances around him this week that make me avoid him on DraftKings for sure.
I agree. Okay, let's look at some more running backs this week. I talked about Tevin Coleman. He's just a beast. I mean, he missed a whole quarter last game and still put up some gaudy numbers against Mizzou. Against Maryland at home, there's no reason not to roster this guy. I mean, like I say, he does it all. 30, 46, 39 fantasy points in his this season for him on DraftKings. I mean, you got to love Tevin Coleman. Curtis Artis-Payne, I like Artis-Payne a lot this week, Chop, against Louisiana Tech. He's been one of the more underrated backs, I think, that doesn't get enough pub. And, his carries are going to be in the probably low 20s as opposed to some of these other guys, but I think he has really nice upside. And 7,200 is a little bit pricey, maybe on DraftKings, but I don't mind Artis-Payne this week. But I know you're smelling blowout there.
Yeah, 32 point spread, but he is what he is. He's a guy who could get the ball 20 times in this game, and if he does, he could take it four touchdowns out of it. That's just the way the offense works over there. So I'm definitely not hating on him. And where I found a way to get him in, I would get him in. But the thing is, if you're going to take the Gurley or even the Tevin Coleman or whatever, it's tough to get that second really high-priced guy in there.
It is.
Unless you're really talking about punting your wide receiver, and by punt I don't mean totally not like you punt your tight end, but if you want to drift down there and take some lower priced wide receivers and take a chance on them, you can squeeze them in. But I prefer to keep at least a little bit of beef in the salary at wide receiver, and we'll get into those guys later. But it's tough. These prices, these guys are doing a good job of pricing. FanDuel's a little bit soft. As opposed to DK, but it's still tough to make a little bit of you can't have who you want, that's for sure.
Do you trust Thomas Rawls this week? He's really cheap over on FanDuel for Central Michigan. They said he's going to play, and but they haven't said if he's going to start. I think his number's in the mid-6s over there. Thoughts on Thomas Rawls?
I've made about 8 or 9 teams on FanDuel, and I have not. He's not on any rosters yet. I just haven't found the need to use him because of the things you mentioned. It's kind of a toss-up as to what's really going to happen with him. Man, I read a quote from the athletic director today. I forget. To paraphrase it, it was something like, "He's back on the team, but we'll see what kind of playing time." Just doesn't sound.
Man, are you okay? We need some context to this. I mean, you said you didn't sound too confident in that quote.
No, I mean,
that's a good quote. If it's accurate.
I wish I would have wrote it down because it would have been great right now. I would have looked like like I really knew what I was talking about. But no, so they say he's reinstated, and they say we don't know if he's going to start. We don't know about his playing time. Those are red flags, and in Daily Fantasy College, we've always preached to avoid red flags. At 5,200, I think is what his price is. It's a phenomenal value if you're getting the Thomas Rawls that's going to go in and get 30 carries. Listen, I'll tell you, if they make an announcement before the game, Rawls is starting, then I think you can go with him. But if they say before the game he's not going to start, I don't think I take a chance because you never know what not starting is going to mean. Does it mean not the first quarter? Does it mean not the first half?
The regret of taking somebody out of your lineup because they're not starting. Oh, Carlos Hyde last year. I think he did something and missed a bus. I don't know what it was. Wasn't starting. Took him out of all my lineups. Dude scored 5 freaking touchdowns.
No, I get it, man. You don't want to miss out. But like the thing that I encountered was in making teams was that I didn't need to go with Thomas Rawls at 5,200 on FanDuel. I just didn't need it. There was other options out there. Like I saved a little bit at receiver, and I just didn't need to because I thought it was a little bit too risky. If they say he's starting, that's fine. But I mean, to say he's not starting and then to not know what he's going, not even to know if he's going to play. You should Google some of the stuff on him. And first of all, the thing he did wasn't like missing a team bus. They stole a lady's purse, man.
But he didn't use her credit card, so we've got to give him that.
He didn't use them, but his friend did. I mean, come on, man. And he pleaded guilty to it, or he pleaded out to it. So he's guilty. So I mean, like, it's not a missing the bus. We're gonna not let you start the game, but you'll be in the second series. Those kind of things are see-through. This case isn't like that, man. This might be really have him sit on the sidelines with his helmet the whole game. You never know. If he's starting, then you definitely know he's probably getting his 30 carries.
Let me ask you this.
All I'm saying is, if he's not starting, it's a red flag. I don't want to mess with.
If you're putting in 10 teams in the big $25 tournament on FanDuel, how many of those 10 teams do you have Thomas Rawls on?
The answer to that is that at this point, I've done 8 teams, and he's on 0 of them.
Wow, very good. See, that's what I like. Okay, let's talk about some guys I do like too. High end, I love Todd Gurley. He's a man amongst boys at home. Got a rest pretty much last week. I think he'll terrorize Tennessee this week. I think Jay Ajayi as well in the late slate is somebody you got to look at. He is that offense. He scored 4 touchdowns against Air Force last season, and outside of that crapper against UConn, which again, West going east, UConn is kind of a slow-down pace school. He's just been awesome. 39 fantasy points on FanDuel, 48 against Colorado State. And even Ole Miss, he had 30 fantasy points, and he only had 86 rushing yards and no running touchdowns. So Ajayi does it all. I love him today. Both those guys are 2 of my favorite backs on the high end of things. What's your take on the Arkansas running backs? They're priced pretty fair on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Both of them have the same salary on FanDuel, and I think they're pretty darn close on DraftKings. Collins and Williams against A&M. Your thoughts?
Collins and Williams. Well, before I get to that, let me just say, man, if guys out there listening like Thomas Rawls, and I don't want to be the one that drives you off of Thomas Rawls and then watch him go out and score 5 touchdowns. So if you like him, play him, that's for sure. I'm just saying there's red flags. So I don't want to be responsible for you missing out on a 5-touchdown game. But to Collins and Williams, like I just can't get into it, man. I just can't get into that split backfield thing. I know they're each going to get a decent amount of carries, but it just doesn't do it for me, man. I really like a workhorse out there, and A&M, we don't really know exactly how. Last year and the year before that, they were really bad against the run. They seem like they've improved this year. Mike Davis was hurt, but they did hold them in check. If somehow A&M, and we were expecting Kenny Hill to be pretty good in this game, if they jump out to a lead, it might even throw the running game for a loop for Arkansas anyway. They might be playing from behind. It's on the road, so that does not play into the favor of Arkansas right there. So personally, they're a fade for me, but they're a running team in the style of Wisconsin, so much so that those guys could both get 25 carries and both put up monster numbers, but they're a fade for me.
Yeah, I think there's some credence to that. I don't have them rostered yet. I haven't done a whole lot of lineups, I'm not going to lie. But I tend to agree. It's tough to know which one's going to get the work. And if you look at Brandon Allen, he's actually had, I think, 2 of their 4 games they've thrown for more than they ran yardage-wise. So I think he's the sneakier play in that game because they could be behind. Okay, a few other names for us here at the running back spot that we need to discuss. Jeremy Langford. What do we make of him? He topped STL Cards DraftKings expert rankings this week. And I liked him, but I don't know if I'm just scared off of what happened last week or what, because he didn't make either of our 2 lists. Did he make anybody's list? I think he made, looks like he made JMB Wings fan down on A25 Smiths, but Hester didn't have him, you didn't have him, Donna didn't have him. So what's your take on Langford? I'm curious to know this because I love his game, but I'm just sick and tired of him sitting out.
He's risky. He's risky. This isn't like they're not into their conference games. When they crank up their conference games, I'll have a lot more confidence in him. but sitting on a 31-point spread, I mean, he'll make my lineup. He's already made my lineup on DraftKings in a couple of spots because the salary, they're just kind of like handing him to you and giving him to you, but definitely not on FanDuel where his price is actually fairly high. So on DraftKings, yes. On FanDuel, no. It's a 31-point spread, and it's been their thing in blowouts this year where he just hasn't got the work at all. So I'm definitely leery of Langford, but the prices, they're just almost begging you to take him on DraftKings, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah, and Mike Davis is also priced down, and it looked like initially Brandon Wilds was going to be out, but I was reading a couple of injury reports. He apparently is going to play this weekend, and that, I've been watching South Carolina a lot. They've been on the tube a good bit this year, and that's a timeshare. I mean, Wilds is in there, maybe not every other series, but I'd say every third series he's in there. And if they get down to the goal line, it's just not given to Mike Davis. If he's not in the game, if it's not his series, he's not carrying the ball. So the matchup is prime. Davis is waiting to probably have a breakout game, but I'm afraid because of that timeshare. So I'll have some exposure, but not all in on him.
I was just so hoping that report was true. I read the same thing you did about Brandon Wilds, and then caught it later on and said, well, now he's going to play. I was like, gosh, that just sucks right there. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, this Mike Davis just hasn't put it up like he did last year. I don't know really if it's part due to injury or something. He's definitely a superior player to Wilds, but he's just not getting the same respect as far as carries that he did last year. So I'm a little bit leery of that, but they are giving. He's another one, just like you said. They're kind of making you take him almost on that night slate on DraftKings with that price. So that's interesting. He could have a good game, but he could also crap out again, just like he's done so far this year, actually, the whole year, pretty much.
Yeah. I like Amir Abdullah a good bit this week going against Illinois. He's matchup proof. Just a monster game against Miami. Awfully expensive on FanDuel. DraftKings is pretty reasonable, so I'll put him in the mix. Leon Allen is back. Western Kentucky. He's been pretty outstanding when we've been able to roster him, and he gets Navy, who, if you remember last week, it was Paul James before he got hurt, and then you had Peoples and Goodwin behind him, and both those guys ran pretty well. So I think that we got to look to Leon Allen a little bit.
Yeah, Leon Allen he's a good player, and they got him pretty fairly priced. He's about $200 less than Cameron Artis paying over there, so that's going to make you think about it. And I mean, he's up there. He's in that $7,000 range. Navy's one of those tricky teams. I like to do a little backlogging and see how teams play against each other the previous year. If the coaching staff and personnel is the same. And last year's game against Navy was a 19-6 game.
Yes.
Because I was looking at Keenan Allen specifically. I mean, Keenan.
He got hurt that game. I remember.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I rostered him that day.
And I was just shocked, though, to see that kind of score with these two teams. So I don't know.
But you know what? I agree with you, but nothing's the same between last year and this year.
Yeah, I would agree.
They've got a new offensive coordinator. Keenan Reynolds is back healthy. Vegas is projecting a high enough line in this one, so I kind of am going to write that off to backup quarterback, and I think the running back they had last year is a bit more of a plotter. Not that Leon isn't, because he kind of is still a little bit, but the kid they had running last year was like 265 or something. Like, he was just a monster. Last thoughts before we get into the value. Duke Johnson with Miami. What do you think?
Ooh, that's your team right there, man.
You won me some money last week, so he had a good week.
Yeah, let's see. Duke against Duke it's a really weird matchup because Duke's defense, the Blue Devils, they're not terrible. When I first saw the game on paper without looking at anything else, I was like, oh yeah, Duke Johnson must play this week. I think he's a great play at 7,500. I think it is on FanDuel and 56 on DraftKings. The DraftKings price seems pretty nice. I mean,
yeah, real nice.
It's he's sitting in that range where there's about three guys, including Mike Davis, in that DraftKings night slate. You could take a three-headed running back monster if you really wanted to. I mean, I like him. I'm looking at his game logs. I looked at his game logs. They weren't that impressive. I don't think he's cracked 100 yards yet this year. But I mean, that just probably means he's due for something big right now. I would imagine. I'm not sure, man. If Duke's defense is for real, it won't happen. But if Duke really does have a pretty good defense, then maybe he struggles a little bit. I'm not sure. At home, it might seem that the passing game picks up more for Miami. I don't know if you've noticed a pattern there, but Kaya seems more comfortable at home.
He does. Yeah, I've been watching them close, and what you can take out of that is Game 1 was a blowout. On the bad end, so they were trying to come from behind. Freshman quarterback on the road, bad situation. FAMU, Arkansas State, those were basically 2 3-quarter games, so no shame in that. And then Nebraska, he played really well. I mean, 93 yards rushing on 18 carries, so over 5 yards a carry. And then the 5 receptions for 84 yards as well. Nearly, I believe, just came short of a score on another pass there. I mean, he scored almost 30 fantasy points, and yet his salary dropped on DK this week. I don't understand that. So I like him a good bit. I think he's borderline must play in that late slate over on DraftKings. Okay, give me some values, Chop. Give me some cheap guys that we can look at.
Okay, cheap. Let's go the early slate on DraftKings. There's not a ton of really cheap guys that I'm super confident in. One guy who stands out to me at 4,800 is Corey Clement for Wisconsin. He's a backup running back, but with that kind of a spread in that game, and Wisconsin projected at about 42 points. He's just like last week where he got in and mopped up with like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. He should do the same this week, and that's a pretty good price on him. You mentioned a guy earlier for Rutgers, Desmond Peoples. They play Tulane this week. Paul James is hurt. Now, we're not 100% sure how the carries are going to break down, but what we do know is that the other running back is not available in this player pool.
How is that possible?
I don't know. And he's the guy who played last year, too. And this guy didn't play last year.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible. Somebody put this in the forums. They have 60% of their player pool is zeros. And yet, there's a guy that they don't have in the player pool. Go figure.
I mean, if you want to take a chance on a guy who could come in and get 20 carries because the starter is hurt, then Peoples for Rutgers could be that guy. One guy who I don't know if you could consider him underpriced for what he's done this year, but I really like him at 4,400 in that day slate is Charles Jones from Kansas State. I mentioned UTEP earlier. Yeah. They're borderline the worst. They are the worst team run defense in the nation, just all around touchdowns, yards per carry, yards a game. Everything totaled up. They're the worst running team. This guy's already popped 3 touchdowns this year, and they had to play Auburn in one of those games, so that's a tough contest. This won't be a tough contest. If he can get 3 touchdowns already, then against UTEP, he may be in for like 2 more. And if we don't like Waters, if you don't like Waters too much, and Kansas State is still projected to score 41 points, Vegas says, then somebody's got to get him, and it would stand to reason that maybe Charles Jones is the guy that gets it. And he's a 4,400 guy. And over on FanDuel, he is $5,000, so that's almost minimum.
Okay, what if I told you there was a guy who's already, this season rushed for 542 yards and 9 touchdowns, 180 yards a game. Would you be interested in rostering him if he was below 7K on DraftKings?
Man, I know where you go with this, and I would say, he's GPP worthy, absolutely, with those kind of numbers, and I think he averages almost 10 yards a carry. And I know who you're talking about. I'll let you get the name, but I think he's a GPP worthy play, man, just strictly on those numbers.
Jarvion Franklin for Western Michigan, 6,500 on DraftKings. I don't know if I got the stones to play him because, if they're playing Ohio, then yeah, but they're playing Virginia Tech, who I don't think is particularly happy right now, and one of the better defenses out there. So he's clearly running, like crazy right now. But and it's a good value. I kind of agree. I think he's GPP only for me, but certainly had to throw him out there. What about D. Hart this week? 4,300 for CSU going against Boston College. Could he be a running back play for you?
Absolutely. They've shown that they're a run-heavy offense when they're not trailing in the game too much too early, and this particular game doesn't. It's not projected to be much of a blowout. It's less than double digits on the spread. I saw it at 9 when I wrote them down. So we saw like last year, Capri Bibbs was in this offense and he was crazy good. They like to run the ball. This year, when he's had the opportunity, which means they haven't been blown out of the games, D Hart's actually looked really good. So if they're going to hang in this game, and at 4,300, I think he could make for a very fine play.
I just located a $3,500 crapper on DraftKings early slates. You ready for this one?
Let me write this one down in case I need some salary relief.
Okay, Braylon Hurd of Kentucky.
Oh, the guy in chat just asked about him.
Against Vanderbilt. I'm not even have chat open right now, so I'm just kind of going through. And
I just told him no. I told him no. It's too risky, but
you told him that 3,500.
I didn't know his price. The guy didn't mention his price in chat. Yeah, 3,500. Yeah, listen, on a slate like this, when you can get that kind of salary relief, and then you can bump up to like Gurley and even Tevin Coleman as your two major running backs. You take a shot at it. I mean, if you think the guy, you can play the whole value game and how many points you need per dollar, and if you think he can get that for you in your cash games, and then that allows you to get Gurley and Coleman or Gurley and Melvin Gordon, then you go for it. And I haven't really researched Hurd that much. I didn't know he was injured. I didn't know he was coming back. He looked fairly decent when he was healthy, so it may be worth a gamble.
Okay, as it stands in my latest all-day slate on FanDuel, running back, I had $6K I needed to spend, and I was torn between Ezekiel Elliott or Marlon Mack. Mack is $5,700, Elliott's $6K. Who would you choose between those two for my final running back spot?
Yeah,
Mack gets Wisconsin, and obviously Elliott gets Cincinnati.
The matchup for Mack really scares me off of that one. And on top of that, I think eventually somebody's got to step up in the Ohio State backfield and be the Carlos Hyde from last year. Now nobody has that kind of talent, but somebody's gonna be the go-to guy, and I think Elliott's kind of inching his way there. So just based on potential and matchup, I'd go Elliott.
I think he's the call too. 7 for 65 and 4 for 52 against Kent last week. I mean, you're talking like 9 yards a carry when he ran the football. I mean, that was a blowout situation, so he didn't need to have that much exposure. And he's yet to rush for over, like, that was the most he's ran for in his career, I think, in a game, at least in the last 10 games I'm looking at his logs. So I'm a little bit leery of that, but I think there's a little bit better chance that's going to be a closely contested, maybe kind of competitive game than what we're going to see in Wisconsin. So I initially had Mack, but you know what? I think I've changed it to Elliott.
No, I mean, you got to think, though, like 2 weeks before the season started, when he was supposed to be the #1 bell cow back, he broke his wrist and he had surgery. So he went into that first game with a backup quarterback, Barrett, and we all expected him to be lights out. We expected him to be Carlos Hyde, but he was still hurt, and they didn't run him out there. He looked awful. They didn't run him out there for a full complement of carries. As each week goes by, he gets healthier and healthier. So once he's healthy enough to take on 20 carries, if you have him in your lineup that day, nobody else will, and you will reap the benefits. So maybe this is the day.
Ooh, Kansas, last thing. Kansas sucks. Texas sucks. But Malcolm Brown is kind of good. Jonathan Gray is kind of good. I don't have them right now. That total's too low for me. But I hope I'm not missing something with this being Kansas. You got any of those guys?
I don't have them because they are in that committee. But Kansas does suck. And then Texas is in the perfect range at -14 to where they're going to be on the field the whole game, but it's not too much of a blowout to where the third and fourth stringers get on. So Brown and Gray will kind of rotate and get a bunch of carries. And I got a feeling they'll run the ball and pound it into the grounds because Swoops, he's not a very impressive passer. And
yeah, 41 and a half.
R.I.P. David Ash and his R.I.P. David Ash's football career. He's retired now, so it's Swoops' party, and he's no good. So they're going to run the ball as much as they can. This might be like a little mini Wisconsin kind of thing here, where they just run those two running backs all day.
Feels like a 17-6 game or something.
It's Kansas though. They can't just. They got to score more than 2 touchdowns on Kansas. You would think.
We'll see. You'd think. Very possible.
Vegas says 4 touchdowns.
It's Vegas, no.
A
lot.
No, that's what. Tell CSU that.
Don't whatever you do, don't ever use that when you're talking to Roto Kevin about this, because he scoffs at Vegas, which is weird.
He also gave us that
Blanchflower
last year, and then some other guy here.
Hey, what do you think of the UMass quarterback this week?
Oh man, I don't even know if I have him written down anywhere. No.
You go.
Fropenaple's brother.
Hey, Marshall's not playing this week, so I need to get it in the show somehow.
I don't like him much for fantasy purposes, but I like his brother though. I'll tell you what. I'm pretty sure the tight end Fropenaple, even on his bye week, is going to outscore 99% of the tight ends that are playing this week.
It will be 2 seconds on tight ends. We got to get moving. Move on to wide receiver. Oh, I can give you one more name. I think it's underpriced. Is Derek Green of Michigan on DraftKings. I know Michigan's terrible to watch, but he is still their #1 guy, and they're going to run the football this week, especially if they go to a different quarterback. And Minnesota kind of stinks, so I think he's underpriced. I think he can get like 80 yards and a touchdown, and he's 4,400. So, all right, let's move on. Another touchdown, Oklahoma State. Wide receivers. I'm not usually. Obviously, you've got Spruce, who everybody loves. Spruce. He's going to be on everyone's lineup. There's a fade out there in a GPP. It's Spruce, but he's been so good this year, it's hard to think that he's just not going to keep it going against a crappy team like Cal. But he'll be probably the highest owned guy out there. But outside of him, there's not a lot on the high end that I'm looking at. I'm finally abandoning Jamison Crowder, Antoine Goodley. No, thank you. Katie Cannon's a good player, but there's just so many mouths to feed with 2 other wide receivers coming back. I think this is like strictly kind of mid-range for me at wide receiver. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I found it hard to make a roster and get the running backs that I felt comfortable with and get Nelson Spruce. He's priced way up on both sites. So I avoided him in cash games. And I didn't want to, but you kind of had to. If you're going high range, let's take DraftKings. There's a pretty significant drop-off between Spruce as far as salary, Spruce and Rashad Green. And I think I would list Rashad Green as the next best wide receiver because I think Jameis Winston has a big game, and if that's the case, then Green is the only guy he throws to. So for that reason, now there's not enough of a difference on FanDuel. There's a $200 difference on FanDuel. Probably not enough to choose Green over the Spruce Goose. That's his new nickname, all right? And on FanDuel, Tyler Lockett's priced up for me a little bit too high in that 7,600 range. On FanDuel and on DraftKings too, I'll tell you the guy in that kind of
55 on DraftKings. You can't tell me he's priced up.
I'll get over. I said FanDuel specifically. Said FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's the most underpriced guy of the week. I was going to get into that, but I was going to give you the name of like that mid-range guy who I love this week and who I'm trying to pit on all my teams. And I know you're going to scoff at this one because you don't like this guy. I love Ty Montgomery this week. I think this is the potential 3-touchdown game I've been looking for. When I went back and looked at the game logs, they're not that bad, and they've been some fairly decent, like tough games to manufacture points for a wide receiver. And now he gets a matchup that's just perfect. It's at Washington, touchdown spread. I think, and they don't have anybody else. They've shown that they don't have anybody else to get the ball to in their hands that can make a play. I think he's the guy. I think this is the week he gets 2 or 3 touchdowns.
You know what? You know how I know you're thinking straight? Because I've got Ty Montgomery in my lineup already.
There you go.
Or not. You hit up on the points exactly why. They haven't really played anybody yet with a whole lot of and this is a great matchup for him to go off. And look at those game logs, like pretty impressive when you break it all down. I mean, he had 23 points against Army, and he had 2 carries for 7 yards and 86 yards receiving, but did have a touchdown. But 8 receptions, 9 receptions against USC, who obviously is a legit opponent, but 23 points against Arizona State at the end of last year, had a 51-point game. Now, he definitely, had some situations last year where he had a lot of volume, but the difference was Tyler Gaffney could run the ball. Barry Sanders Jr. is got like 1/100th of his dad's ability as a running back. He's not very good. This Kelsey Thomas or whatever his other name is a wide receiver on FanDuel and is a running back. He's not any good. They're a passing team now, not a running team. So I think Ty Montgomery's a fabulous play chopper. But on FanDuel, too, Malcolm Kennedy at 6,500, like the cash game play of the day, right? I mean, he's a lock for like 9 receptions for 100.
That's why I'm more of a fan of Malcolm Kennedy on DraftKings. He's a little bit more.
He's more expensive over there.
He's a little bit more. It's not that much of a difference, but I mean, when you think about the kind of game he plays, he's receptions, and he's going to try to crack that 100-yard mark. He hadn't got a touchdown all year long, and I'm not saying there's reasons behind it. I mean, there was 2 games that were blowouts. He still got a bunch of receptions and yards. He just couldn't. They don't look to him in the end zone. Okay, they look to Ricky Seals-Jones. Well, and that's a whole different story. But
Seals-Jones, I hate
you. But because of the mass amount of receptions, I just think he plays better on DraftKings. You get those receptions piling up a point per, and then if he cracks the 100 yards, you get the bonus for receiving yards. And if he doesn't get in the end zone on FanDuel and he doesn't get a touchdown, you're kind of like left with a mediocre game.
But here's your call. He gets in the end zone this week.
I would think, listen, they're projected to score about 39. So if he can't get in there in this game, then I'll lose faith that he'll ever score a touchdown this year. How about that?
There you go. Goodley, maybe on FanDuel at 7K. Definitely not on DraftKings. Too expensive over there. What do you think of Funchess? I haven't watched a lot of Michigan. I watched him last week, and I didn't realize how good he is. He's really, really good. Now, their quarterback is not really good. They might have another one. On FanDuel, not so much at 71. But I don't hate, because I don't think a lot of people will be on him. Him on DK this week. He's, I believe 5,200 over there. And, I think Michigan's a bit embarrassed after what happened last week. I think they're going to show up and play against Minnesota.
I mean, embarrassed or not, I think he's shown that he is like an exceptional wide receiver. Can you imagine if he was still a tight end eligible guy? My God, man, it wouldn't even be a discussion every week. But anyway, I think he's shown he's number one, the only wide receiver in the whole offense. And whether they win big or lose big, those blowouts or those games where they're getting blown out, he's always seems to be the one guy when he's been in there and been healthy that actually puts up decent numbers. And I just against Minnesota, I don't think it's a blowout either way. So I think he's in there, and they throw to him a bunch, and I think he racks up a bunch of receptions. And with his size, there's a great chance he gets in the end zone 1, maybe 2 times.
Do you trust Stephon Diggs?
That's a debate right there, man.
It's hard.
When you look at his games, his game log, and just games in general, like if you take away that one big play against West Virginia where he caught that pass and he ran with it 70 yards. He's strictly a 5-catch, 50-yard guy with no touchdown. 5 catches, 50 yards a game, no touchdown. He's just not been the playmaker. But on the flip side, we're playing Indiana, and if there's one thing we've learned the last 2 years, you just got to play guys against Indiana. I hope he doesn't let me down. I trust him up to a certain point, but it's risky. But I mean, it's Indiana, man. You gotta fire up. You gotta have some kind of exposure to the guys opposite of Indiana. And if you're going to play C.J. Brown, of course he could run a lot. But if he throws a couple long ones to Diggs, you could set yourself up real good in a GPP.
Yeah, I think he's a great GPP play for sure. I think both Hamilton and Geno Lewis are fine this week going against Northwestern. Hackenberg, we didn't talk about him, but I'm going to roster him a little bit. The guy is thrown still for massive number of yards, and sooner or later these touchdowns are going to come. Bill Belton is not just going to keep running in touchdowns, I promise you. So I like those wide receivers. Give me a few other names that you're looking at this week.
Oh, well, okay, we covered some of the middle and high guys. I'll give you some lower guy. One guy on DraftKings that's interesting to me for $4,500 to save salary cap is Shea Fields from Colorado. If I'm thinking that this game is going to be a high-scoring Pac-12 game, this guy gets about 6 to 7 catches a game, like easy, if not more than that. And especially if they do something and try to like double cover Spruce, he'll have a huge game. He's only 4,500, but he's put up some fairly decent PPR numbers. Even just, and this game is projected to be crazy scoring. I'll give you my sleeper, low-end wide receiver sleeper of the day on DraftKings. For low price, obviously not altogether. His name is Isaiah Ford for Virginia Tech. He's at 4,400, and he's starting to come on strong. For an offense that can't run the ball. The Vegas is looking real nice for him this week. Got him scoring about 38 points at home. You already said they were going to be mad and angry. I got a feeling he's going to put up his 8 catches again this week because that's about where he's been the last couple of weeks. I think they found their number 1 wide receiver, so I kind of like him at 4,400 quite a bit.
Okay, well, you gave me one I didn't have my eye on. I'm going to give you one. Going against FIU, Jamarcus Nelson for UAB. Had 5 for 144 a couple of weeks ago, and has played in a couple of garbage games before that. I like him this week at 3,700 as a kind of a wide receiver pump play. I think he's the best receiver they have, and he did me well before, so I don't hate on him. Reynolds for A&M at 4,100 seems still awfully low over on DraftKings. And another name for you, Clemson, Mike Williams, min salary, FanDuel. If you expect, Watson to have a good game, Williams might be the recipient of some of those good stats. Ricky Seals-Jones, you like him?
He's the guy they look to when they want a touchdown. So I'm thinking he's in play. If he's in play, it's going to be on FanDuel because of the touchdowns. He's not a volume guy that I would want to fire up in a PPR. And I mean, I played him last week when there was a lot of hype around him whenever going into that game last week with the injury situations for A&M, and he was a real disappointment. So it's going to be hard for me to really roster him too much this week.
Isaiah Myers, Vince Malley, or Craycroft. You got 63, 6K, 56 on FanDuel.
I think the safest play is Myers, but I actually have a team for that late slate, which is a pretty bad slate over there on DraftKings. I have a team where I took Myers and Mail. So I just think Holiday's going to have a good game, and if he does, in a PPR format, man, if he's winging it 50 times, if he's winging it 50 times and he completes 30 of them, they got to go to somebody. Those are all points, to your wide receivers every single time. And over there on DraftKings, they only got 9 late games. It's not a bad option.
Kenneth Scott not bad either in that game for Utah. Everybody's going to look at Dariz Anderson, and he's not bad at 6,900 on FanDuel, a little pricey in DraftKings. But Scott is somebody who does catch a lot of passes in that offense, and that does become the kind of high scoring game you expect Chop. Then I expect him to be part of it, so I'm going to throw him out there as an option. Okay, we're running late. Quickly, tight end wise. Did we mention Sam Arneson last week on the show? Because I ended up having him a little bit for Wisconsin.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think we did either, so my bad. But it worked out well for me in the end. But Sam Arneson, I'm back on him again this week. He looked really good, and this is a couple games in a row. 3,300 on FanDuel. I like the whiskey tight end.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of decision making at tight end. You either go with Arneson if you have a few extra dollars and you absolutely don't need them. You squeeze Gerald Christian in there if you want to. Other than that, there's nobody going up above the $3,300 mark for me on any site that I'm choosing. Everybody's low, and if I need to save that $200 off of Arneson, I'll look for a minimum salary tight end on either side if I have to.
Yeah,
It's about a three-headed monster at tight end.
I mean, you're right. I mean, the thing about it is if you get it, though, if you get the guy who has a big game, it's a nice advantage to have because it's so hard to figure it out. But you know what? I mean, Clyde Wofford scored a touchdown in, 3 or 4 this year? I mean, he's another guy to look at.
Yeah, he's good. But they got him priced at that. Wofford is 38. Okay, so he's 3,800 on that slate that night. Connor Hamlet's 4,200. Those are your most expensive guys. That's when you're sitting there building a team and then you need that extra 500.
So, well, quickly, let me ask you something because you brought up a good point about Connor Hamlet. Bolden, their number one wide receiver, is hurt. What does Oregon State do? Is there a receiver that steps up? Is it more Ward and Storm? Is it Hamlet? Who gets the bump?
My initial thought was, okay, I'll take a look at Richard Mullaney because I think he's a security blanket, and if Bolden's not in there, there's a lot of familiarity with him and the quarterback, Sean Mannion. But then I saw the matchup at USC, and none of the guys intrigued me anymore. I would play Hamlet if I could, but at the most expensive tight end on the board on both sides, I'll pass. So for personally, even with the Bolden injury, I won't mess around against USC. I don't think.
Yeah, USC's defense should be ready to go in this one. A week off since they lost to Boston College, and they've got a pretty good defense out there. So I don't mind them, and don't mind Nelson Aguilar as well. I think he'll have a pretty good game at wideout. Well, Chop, that's it. We're running late, so we are out of here. We certainly thank you so much for joining us on this edition of College Football After Dark. Remember, Saturday morning, you get this guy, Head Chopper, in the expert chat. So he will go, one-on-one with the Chop. It doesn't get any better than that. So if you're an Incentives member, you get access to that. If you're not an Incentives member, guess what you can do? You can watch EMAC and STL Cardinals. They get rolling at 10:30 on Saturday morning. Do subscribe to our Incentives if you haven't done so. Some great columns there, great free content as well if you don't want to pony up the cash. But regardless, we certainly appreciate you joining us here on Grinders Live, College Football After Dark. I'm going for my third straight GPP win in the late slate on DraftKings. So I've won each of the last 2 weeks. I got to make it 3 in a row.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So that's my goal for the week. But we thank you again so much for this. If you didn't catch the the show in its entirety, you can check the playback. It won't be going anywhere. So we will say goodbye to you for tonight. Have a great weekend, everyone.